So this week I've taken as a theme colour and temperature, so warm and cool colours. And I'm hoping through a series of demonstrations and explanations to get you a little bit more familiar with the idea of the temperature of a colour and how that can be used as a way of helping you recognise colours, but more importantly, as a way of helping you balance colour within a composition. I'm sure I've read it somewhere or heard it said somewhere that when you're balancing, when you're harmonising colour in a composition, it can often be more important the temperature of the colour that you use rather than the colour itself. So if what is needed to balance a composition is something warm, it might not matter whether it was a warm green or a warm blue, because it's the temperature that's more significant. Anyway, let's come back to that perhaps. So I'm going to take you through a series of stages. I've already been out and done a little bit of a landscape drawing up on Arthur's Seat, and that was done following an exercise that I've concocted, whereby you start drawing with a blue pastel and a brown pastel. So a blue pastel will be cool, a brown pastel will be warm, and I built up the drawing with those opposites and then gradually introduced other colours. And I hope that if you try that, you'll find it's a very interesting experience of temperature in colour. I also want to talk about some of these simple colour schemes which would be appropriate for landscapes, and I'm looking at cool skies and warm grass, warm sky and cooler grass. So looking at those, harmonising those effects and creating depth, because when you contrast, for example, a cool sky with a warm piece of land, then you actually create depth in your compositions. And the same would apply down here. These were almost little swatches for seascapes with a cool sky and a warm sea and vice versa, creating that depth. But maybe first I would like to start, as you might imagine, with a colour wheel, so we can have a little bit of a reminder about colour theory. So I've got my primary colours, the yellow, the red and the blue. Between them, the secondary orange, violet and green. And you can see that I've actually started to develop a kind of spectrum of a continuum from the orange to what is called yellow-orange to the yellow, from the yellow to yellow-green through to the green. And I've done that partly because I want to make the point that, firstly, what's pretty obvious, that one half of the spectrum, one half of this colour wheel, the red, the orange and the yellow, these are the warm colours. And then within the context of the colour wheel, relative to that warm half, we've got the cooler half of the violet, blue and green. But as I said, the whole business of temperature is more complex because it's a relative phenomenon, and within the colour wheel we may have a warm half and a cool half. But if we start to look at any of these colours, for example the yellow, as we go from the yellow towards the orange, we get these warm yellows. So yellow to yellow-orange. And then if we go in the other direction, towards the green, we get cool yellows. The same would apply to the blue. This is a warm blue going towards the violet. It's got some red in it. This is a cool blue going towards the green because it's got some yellow in it. So this is where it gets more nuanced. We have a warm half of the colour wheel and a cool half, but within each colour we have warm and cool versions. So I think from a very basic point of view, I think it's useful to be able to name to be able to identify the temperature of a particular colour, to recognise a lemon yellow from what would be a cadmium yellow, or a chrome yellow, something warm or something cool. And then secondly, to know that the effect of different temperatures of colour, the effect that they have on each other. So that's where perhaps where I'm going with some of these diagrams and demonstrations, which I would quite like to do for you in front of your eyes. So I'm hoping that this will be visible on the screen. It's always tricky reproducing colours. But this business of warm and cool contrasts. So I'm just inventing a landscape palette here, but I've got a green. I think it's a sort of middle green. And I want to combine it with a warm blue and a cool blue. So let's say this is my grass. And if I were to take, this is a warm blue relative to my cool blue. So I'm just putting down a bit of sky. So I'm just imagining a simple landscape palette. Now if I was to try my middle green with a cool sky, let's see if you see any difference and whether I can modify my colours to balance them. So I hope that's come out reasonably well. That is a cool green. Here we go. I just said a cool green. I meant a cool blue. I'm going to be doing this all the time, tripping up. So a cool blue, which is a bit greenish. I don't know how well that's working for you, but I think there's a better balance between the warm blue sky and the middle green grass. And so I'm going to try putting a little bit of yellow over that green, so that I've now got a cool sky and a warm grass. And I think there's a better harmony there, but I don't know how well that's coming out on the camera. So let's see if we can bring it a little bit closer for you to compare. Warm sky, middle green, cool sky, warmer green. Let's try another one that I was going to illustrate the point with, thinking in terms of, I'll probably on the email show you some of McTaggart's seascapes, and it's often struck me when I look at them that McTaggart will either have a cool sky, say like this. Oh, wrong one. Not quite turquoise, but certainly a blue-green. And that will be contrasted with warm water. So this might be something like making your sky from cerulean and your water from ultramarine. And that creates a depth, and it's a contrast of temperature. But we can actually reverse them. So we can get a warm sky, make sure I've got clean fingers, and cool water. Again, we'll see how well that comes out on your on the camera. Let's seems to be a bit better if I bring it closer. I think it's hard for you to see the difference. So this is a cool sky, warm water. This is a warm sky and cool water. So really what I'm trying to demonstrate there is the depth that's created by this contrast of temperature. And it might be that if you were working with a composition of, a seascape, that you would be adjusting your colours. So in this instance, it's blue, but it's the temperature of the blue that really matters. The same as what I tried to illustrate up here. I've got green grass and I've got blue sky, but it does matter what the temperature of those blues and greens are relative to each other. So I'm now, I'm not now going to head off because I've done it already, but the next thing in the video is going to be the little demonstration of this exercise. And perhaps while we're in daylight, I should show you that I took a blue pastel and I drew lines with my blue pastel, and then I worked on top of the blue with a brown, and they would mix and give me something dark, and I could change the emphasis, the temperature, from the warm brown to the cool blue, and then I built up colours on top, the yellows in particular, and then I started to vary some of the blues, sometimes using cooler blues or cooler greens, as I started to push the different parts of the drawing in the direction of different temperatures. And I would recommend that for Monday you at least have a go at that exercise of starting with a cool and a warm colour, a blue and a brown, or a blue and an orange you could use, and then building up a landscape and seeing if you can start to tease out the warm and cool colours within your landscape, and also identify a balance of temperature within the composition. So I thought a good way of trying to get to grips with this business of warm and cool colours would be to try a little bit of landscape. So I've come up to Dunsappiloch. Unfortunately it's not very sunny. It'd be nice if there was more light, more contrast. But I've tried to devise an exercise which will give me a chance to talk about warm and cool, and if you try it out, it hopefully will make more sense of things to you. So I want to talk about warm and cool colours, seeing them and recognising them, but then also balancing them within a composition. So I've just been practicing. I'm doing very small thumbnail sketches. So this is 1/4 of A4, and I'm going to start a new one and give you some kind of parameters. I'm going to start by drawing in blue and brown and relate those to warm and cool colours, and then add some more colours as my little thumbnail sketch develops. So as I've been explaining, temperature is a relative thing, and I'm going to be starting this drawing with a blue pastel, there it is, and a brown pastel. And as you well know, when I mix these colours together, they're going to cancel each other out. So I'll be able to make some greys, some blacks, but I can think of these two colours in terms of the blue being cool and the brown being warm. So let's see, I'll just sketch out in blue first. This is what I suggest you try. If you can find a landscape, go into a landscape or get some reference material. So what I start with in a way is a kind of tonal drawing. Actually, I'm going to use the blue marks first. Let's see what's on the screen. I'm going to make some blue marks and then maybe do some blue tone for some of the darker areas. Looking with my eyes half closed, I can smudge some of that. And now if I mix the brown in, for my rocks which are brown, I want to keep that warm brown mixture, and some of these dark areas where the rocks are, where the bank meets the water, I probably want them to be warmer as well. And then of course I can't just use blue and orange, blue and brown. I'm going to introduce some yellow now to turn some of those blues into greens. So I would say that is, and then I've got yellow gorse obviously. So by adding this yellow to the blue, I think I'm basically warming it up. I'm making it green, but in terms of the sort of balance of colours in my scene, it's all relative, so it gets very confusing, but that is warming up some of those blues by adding the yellow. Then I want to get a bit more blue into the sky here. My fingers clean, I'm going to spread that out. And what I found, when I was practicing this a bit, what gets very challenging and confusing is what's the difference in the temperature between the sky and the water that's reflecting the sky. And with what I've experimented with, I'm coming to the conclusion that the sky is a bit cooler. The sky is a cooler blue, and I think the water is a slightly warmer blue. So I'm just getting some white onto that. I don't know how well this is going to come out on film. But getting some white into the blue for the sky, and then I think I really need to get a little bit more of the brown into the water. What I will probably eventually do, at the moment I'm trying to limit my colours and just mix them so that I can talk to you about changing the balance of the temperature, warming things up, cooling them down. But eventually I'll probably add some new colours which are sort of purer versions of the mixtures that I'm trying to make. As I say, this is hopefully an exercise which will allow you to experience changing the temperature of colours. I mean, it's changing the mixture, and you can say they're getting bluer, they're getting browner. But if you can start to think in terms of they're getting warmer and they're getting cooler, then I think you're better placed to then deal with the overall balance within a drawing. So there we go. I'm getting a little bit more, I think the water's got a bit more brown, a bit less blue. The sky's got a bit more blue and a bit less brown. Greens, and I should do something about the green down here, which actually strangely I think is a bit cooler. So I think the green on my near bank, which is only just coming in, is a slightly bluer green. So again, I'll just make it from the same mixtures. So for all of these greens I've used a fairly kind of golden yellow, but I want to make that one a bit bluer. So a bit less yellow and a bit more blue. So I'm trying to mix the colours that I see. I'm trying to recognise whether they're cool colours or warm colours, but I can also stand back from my drawing and start to get a feel for the balance of warm and cool colours. In order to get depth and contrast in my drawing, I need to be balancing warm and cool. And if there's an overall too warm temperature, then it won't harmonise, it won't look right. And so I have to play around with those balances, and if I know which of my colours are warm and which are cool, then I can start to adjust them. So I'm just going to get a little bit of colour into these branches, and then I'll start to make a few more adjustments using some new colours. So I just want to get these trees. So I'm using the brown and the blue and I'm getting a little bit of yellow into them. I think that's what I see. But now, so for example, I had suggested that the near bank was a cooler blue. No, a cooler green. And so I'll try some extra colours. So this is a very cool green. This is I suppose it's a kind of pale viridian if we were doing oil. So I don't know how well that's coming out, but I'm mixing some of that into my foreground grass, which I think is a truer colour, but hopefully influences the overall colour of my drawing. I could get some more fresher blues into the sky. So I had decided that the sky was a warm blue. No, I hadn't. I'm confusing myself. I had decided that the sky was actually cooler than the water. But I think that's all right. So it's relative. That's my blue I'm using for the sky. But I think the blue I use for the water could just have a little bit more purple in it. So I'm taking it towards the warmer blue. But I don't want the purple to be too strong. So I might put some brown into that, just to knock it back. So that's a fairly short demonstration, I think, of something I suggest you try. So start the drawing with blue and brown and introduce some other colours, but if you can see your blue as your cool extreme and your brown as your warm extreme, then you can start to get a feel for adjusting the balance of colours. It would be easier, I would suspect, if you were able to do this either with a well-lit photograph or on a sunny day. But, well, it's worth doing definitely, whatever the conditions. And then having perhaps tried something very small, so I've ended up with almost half of A4 and attempted to mix some of the colours that you see and try and think of them in terms of warm and cool. You could then perhaps go on to think in terms of the balance of warm and cool in a composition. Okay, so I look forward to seeing your experiments and hearing about your experience.